Good morning, everyone. So, just a quick question. Imagine fuel prices suddenly double tomorrow. Like, genuinely double. Your Gojek ride gets expensive. Ordering McDonald's through Grab suddenly feels like a bad financial decision. And even basic things like soap start costing more. For us in Indonesia, that's not just inconvenience, that's a problem. And that's exactly why the government decided that fuel subsidies exist. Hello everyone, welcome to an episode of Things Explained with Minecraft. Today we'll be discussing Indonesia's BBM subsidies, also known as fuel subsidies. So, let's start. So, what even are fuel subsidies? Basically, the government helps pay part of the fuel price so we don't have to pay the full amount. In this situation, these subsidies are mainly done through Pertamina. So when global oil prices go up, we don't immediately feel the full impact because the government is covering part of it. You can think of it like the government acting as a sort of buffer so people don't suddenly panic over rising costs. Now you're probably asking, why does the government even do this? Firstly, to keep fuel affordable. Tons of people in Indonesia depend on fuel every singular day, not just for transport, but for work and running small businesses. For example, think about Gojek drivers, delivery drivers, truck drivers, fishermen, and even farmers using machines. Then you've got small businesses like street food sellers or online sellers who rely on delivery services. If fuel gets expensive, their costs go up drastically. Secondly, to keep things stable. Because here, when fuel prices suddenly increase, the people don't really appreciate that. We've seen protests in the past. Fuel prices are quite a sensitive issue here in Indonesia, so the government tries to avoid sudden shocks. Fuel also affects transportation, right? So if transport costs increase, moving goods becomes, well, more expensive. That includes daily necessities like rice, vegetables, eggs, cooking oil, basically everyday commodities. So, what happens? Sellers, they increase prices to cover their higher costs, and suddenly, everything in your daily life becomes more expensive, not just fuel. Now, you might be thinking, wait, isn't the government losing tons of money with every purchase of fuel? And yeah, they are. The government is basically paying the difference between the real price and what we actually pay at the pump. However, they have to do this to avoid fuel prices rising, food prices rising, transport costs rising, and people struggling more. That can not only slow down the economy because people spend less, but can also lead to social unrest. So instead, the government takes the financial hit to keep things stable in the short term. It's not a perfect solution, but it's like choosing between a controlled problem now or a bigger problem later. Now, who actually benefits from this? In theory, fuel subsidies are supposed to support lower income groups, small businesses, and public transport drivers by making fuel more affordable. That's the intention. But reality has a habit of ignoring intentions. Because higher income groups use more fuel overall, they end up receiving a bigger share of the subsidy. So while it aims to improve equality, it doesn't always succeed. It's helpful, but just not evenly helpful. Moving on to the cost, which is where things start to hurt for the government. Fuel subsidies are extremely expensive and take up a large portion of the government budget. Just last year in 2025, they took up approximately 26.7 trillion rupiah. While they do help the economy run more smoothly by lowering transport and production costs, which keeps prices stable and prevents sudden economic shocks, that's just the efficiency argument. Let's address the very obvious elephant in the room, its disadvantages. It's a lot of money for something that mostly works in the short term. When global oil prices rise, the government has to spend even more just to maintain that stability. And every extra rupiah cent here is money not going to education, healthcare, or infrastructure. So, yes, it keeps things calm now, but at a pretty serious long term cost. As for feasibility, it's actually quite easy to implement and maintain, which is probably why governments favor it. No complicated systems, no major restructuring needed. But try to change and remove it, and suddenly everybody has opinions. Public backlash and political resistance make reform incredibly difficult, so it's simple to run but painfully difficult to fix. So, does this policy actually work? In the short term, yes. It keeps fuel prices low and stable, helps people manage daily costs, and prevents sudden economic disruption. But long term, it doesn't solve deeper energy issues. It's expensive, and it isn't always fair. Basically, it's convenient as a short term fix, but it builds long term problems in the background. A little bit like procrastination, but on a national scale. To give you a view of the bigger picture, let's zoom out and take a look at the timeline so far. Back into the 1960s to the 1990s, subsidies worked well because Indonesia had a ton of oil. But in the early 2000s, Indonesia turned into a net oil importer, which basically made subsidies a lot more expensive to maintain. In 2005 and 2008, fuel prices increased, people went on riots, and they protested quite a lot. However, from 2013 onwards, the government slowly started reducing subsidies. In 2015, under President Joko Widodo, there was a major reform and most gasoline subsidies were removed. However, in 2018 and 2019, prices were kept stable again, mostly for political and economical reasons. In 2022, disaster struck during the global energy crisis. Fuel prices increased significantly. And now, from 2023 to modern day, Indonesia is trying to shift towards more targeted subsidies. Now that we've analyzed BBM subsidies, let's look at what Indonesia can do to improve them. First, they could make subsidies targeted, meaning only people who really need them receive them, like what India has been doing. Second, changes should be gradual. Sudden price increases can shock people, but this was avoided by Malaysia, who gradually raised prices. And third, monitoring should be improved so subsidies actually reach the right people, like in China and Malaysia, where they use electronic identification cards to check if you're eligible for the subsidy. So, overall, fuel subsidies are quite an important aspect for Indonesia. They help keep life affordable and prevent sudden economic problems. But they also cost a lot, and if they are not managed properly, they can be unfair and unsustainable. So the goal isn't really to remove them completely, but to make them smarter and more targeted. Because at the end of the day, even if fuel feels cheap, someone is still paying for it.